So after a fairly relaxing break, I'm back, and that means more videos for you guys to enjoy, as well as more content on the website. As you probably already know, I am going to be at the Beijing Global Round, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. For the rest of you going to the other 5 global rounds, I hope you guys have a great time, and I really hope that my website and these YouTube videos will help you in your journey in the World Scholars Cup, which is definitely an experience that is quite unlike any other. But let's get back down to it. So this week we have 2 videos coming out. This one and another one later on, probably by tomorrow. And both of these videos are going to be about events of the World Scholars Cup, as a commenter by the name of Logic on the website has asked that I make videos on these 2 events before anything else. And I think that's pretty logical. Sorry. Anyways, for this video, we're going to focus on one of the most stress-inducing and panic attack viable events of the World Scholars Cup, and that is obviously the Scholars Challenge. So on this episode of Avanexplains, we're going to take a look at how not to panic on the challenge. So let's delve straight into it. What is the Scholars Challenge? Well, the Scholars Challenge is, well, as it might imply, it is a multiple choice test. Instead of filling out answers by writing them down or by drawing a picture, you are going to fill out bubbles corresponding to different answers. The event is 60 minutes long, slightly more usually for the briefings, and you have 120 questions to answer. There are 6 subject areas. Do the math and you realize that there are 20 questions per subject area. Now you fill in the bubbles for 5 options: option A, option B, option C, option D, and option E. You cannot make another bubble for an F. That doesn't work. It's on the Scholars Ball, so don't do that. There is an answer sheet and a question booklet. You will get both of these at the beginning, usually the answer sheet first and then the question booklet. And then there's an interesting point system, which we'll come on to about now. In most multiple choice tests, you can really only answer one choice. I mean, it goes against the name, but, well, I guess the test name makers didn't really bother with the logistics of it. But in the Scholars Challenge, you can actually answer multiple options. So you can fill in option A and option B if you're uncertain about both of them. Or you can fill in option A, option B, and option C if you don't know that you're certain about any of them. And obviously, as a last resort, if you're really stressed and you're pressed for time, you can fill in all 5, A, B, C, D, E, and you'll still get points. And here's how it works. When you get an answer right and you fill in only one bubble, let's say answer A is the correct answer and you filled in only answer A, you're going to get 1 point. If you filled in 2 options, such as option A and B, and one of them is correct, you're going to get 0.5 points. 3 options, 0.33 points. 4 options, 0.25, and 5 options, 0.2 points. So obviously that's how the scoring system works. It's a little bit more unique, and obviously that's the sort of risk and reward, right? If you fill in more bubbles, there's a higher chance that you'll be correct, but at the cost of the points you'll get if you are correct. And now that's a huge part of strategies and tactics for the challenge, which we'll come on to later on. Now on to the actual subject areas. So this year, as there always have been, there are 6 subject areas in the World Scholars Cup. They are science, special area, history, art and music, literature, and social studies. From the top left, we have the sciences, which is the science of enabling technologies. We have the middle, obviously the Loch Ness alpaca, which is the special area of unsolved mysteries. We have the right, which is a book of an alpaca and a penguin who could have been a mascot of the World Scholars Cup. It is neglected histories. In the bottom left, we have what appears to be a Mario plumber, which I'm going to go ahead and guess is science or social studies. I'm not quite sure, but regardless, we're going to study the science of social studies in a divided world, a society on the edge. And in literature and art and music, obviously the last 2 ones, and these are voices of the unheard, and obviously literature will being texts from, different messages about anything of social class and similar to what social studies is. Now, By no means are you forced to study all 6 of them. That is a gargantuan task. Most of you are middle schoolers, some of you are even high schoolers. You are going to have a lot more work to do than just the World Scholars Cup. It is very, very hard to study all 6 of them, especially to an extent where you know practically everything. I recommend personally that you choose 2 or 3 subject areas to really go in depth on, and then lightly touch the other 3 or the other 4, and sort of deal with how much you're going to get, right? So for example, myself, I love history. I love it as a subject, and I'm going to be taking it in school. I also like unsolved mysteries. They're really interesting to me. So I chose those 2 to study first. And those were the first 2 I think I posted on the website, and certainly the 2 I put the most effort into studying. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't studied science or literature, arts and music at all. It just means that I have a better understanding of history and special area than, say, my teammate does about science or my other teammate does about literature. And your teammates are going to come in very, very handy during and before the challenge. We'll get into that a little later. But remember, the scholar who chooses their subjects are more likely to succeed than the scholar who chooses to specialize in all subjects, because A, it's a huge cram, and B, it's a lot of information. You're likely going to get muddled up, but by no means is it mean you're going to fail. There are scholars who can do amazingly good job by studying all 6 subjects. Shout out to Sarah Shui, a Malaysian scholar from Penang who recently broke the record for the highest amount of points in a single competition. Good job to her, everybody. You'll be seeing her hopefully soon. Now then, let's go on to preparation tips. How do you study for the challenge? The challenge is one of those events where it's like the debates and the writing. You can practice it a lot, and obviously with practice, you're going to get a lot better. Now, people don't really like the challenge because the way to study is like you're studying for school. But remember, this challenge is where you can get the most points in, even more than debates and collaborative writing on their own. So people who do really well in the challenge, but maybe not so well in debate or writing, can still place really high on the leaderboards. So, let's see. Just follow this quote, really. The scholar who studies is the scholar who succeeds. You cannot expect to not study and randomly guess every single answer and somehow place. Maybe you can in regionals. I've seen it happen before. But you definitely can't do that in globals and in TOC. I've had scholars practically crying when they didn't get any medals in the challenge, and then when I find out that they didn't study at all beyond reading a few pages, I realized that, well, that's kind of what you get, right? You didn't study, this is the result. It's kind of like school, really. If you didn't study for an assessment, good luck doing well on it, really, unless you're naturally talented at it. So how do you study? Well, there are different ways to study, right? You can do group studying, which is, something like Kahoots with a school or even Quizlets, and you can share notes with one another and teach one another, basically. This is what I tend to do with my team a lot, have some sort of co-study sessions, and those are really good too. But for the more individual-minded person like myself, you can also study in your own time using online resources such as OnePoa, which I'll link in the comments down below, Avan's backup resources, pretty obvious, and plenty of other World Scholars Cup websites that you are going to be able to find by searching them up. There's also the World Scholars Cup Facebook, apologies. Facebook often has a couple of scholars who are willing to share notes, and you can always DM the scholars if you wish to, get some of their information, because obviously each scholar has their own way to study, and sometimes when you learn from a different perspective, you can uncover something that you never really thought of before. But again, remember, to each their own. God, I'm full of quotes today. But basically, what this means is no scholar is going to be able to study the same as another scholar. Yes, you and your team might be able to study using the same notes, but the way you study your notes is going to be very different from the way, say, I study my notes, or say, another scholar studies their notes, right? Whatever works for you in school can work for you in the World Scholars Cup. So let's get down to the actual challenge tips. How do you fill in the challenge? So the challenge, obviously, here are some key tips. Never 5, mostly once. What I mean by that is that never, ever, 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 ever fill in 5 bubbles on a challenge, right? As a beginner, you can sometimes resort to this, but only in 2 cases. Number 1, you are absolutely uncertain and time is running out, or number 2, you have no time and have a bunch of questions left to answer. The last scenario is one that you want to avoid at all costs, and I'll talk about time management with a challenge, which is really important later on. Now, 2 to 3 is a good range, right? If you want to do ones, you probably can. If you're very, very confident, then you can always fill in one bubble, but you should have at least a couple 2s and maybe 1 or 2 3s, because that's a good range, and that at least ensures that you don't gamble too much when it comes to your number 1s. Because remember, if you fill in only one bubble, you risk not getting the answer correct, because there's a 1 in 5 chance that you will get it right. Now, because the test is 60 minutes long, you should ideally spend 2 minutes per question. Now, by no means do you have to spend 2 minutes thinking about every single question. Some questions you're going to get like that. Other questions you're going to get it in 3 or maybe 4 minutes. Ideally, you shouldn't be spending more than 5 minutes on a single question. If you have a watch with you, which is really good in the Scholars Challenge, or even some sort of clock on the nearby wall, eyeball it every now and then, right? See how long you're spending on a question. Because remember, time is of the essence. Time might not mean money here, but it sure as hell means points. Now, a pencil and an eraser. A pencil is going to be your best friend during the challenge. A number 2 pencil doesn't really matter. Just any really pencil that is dark enough so that a computer is going to be able to read it should be fine. Ideally, it should say computer compatible or something like that, but it should be fine as well if it's not going to be able to do this. I personally have some pencils here. They're computer pencils, as you can see, are slightly inverted here, but these pencils are fine, and this is essentially what it's going to look like when you fill in the bubbles. Remember, Daniel and the crew are going to go over this a lot, but when you fill in the bubbles, please make sure to fill in the bubble fully with dark shading, and not with a smiley face, with a cross, with a check, and certainly not with a drawing on of alpaca, but that'd be pretty cool. What else? Oh yes, an eraser. There will be times when you will mess up the number of a question. I've done it so many times myself, and I've lost points because I didn't have an eraser on handy, and I couldn't quite, rub out my pencil line. Always have an eraser on handy, or at least have one on your table that you will share with another scholar. Speaking of tables, for the challenge, this is one of the few events where this is the only event where you will not be sitting anywhere near your team or scholar from the same school. You will be separated individually, and you will have no contact with anybody else except the people on your table if you want to ask for an eraser or if you want to ask for a pencil, and then that is it. No more communication. And that brings us to our final tip. Check the numbers, right? If you're answering question number 45, make sure that the ABCDE bubble is for question number 45. Because sometimes you'll be so focused on answering questions that you're going to realize soon enough that you messed up a question, you skipped a question, or you didn't answer a question properly and you missed a number on the sheet. Always check at least every 5 to 10 questions that you are going in the right order. Generally what I like to do is that by the time I reach a new section, I stop and look at the previous section and make sure that all the answers are what I want them to be. Remember, time management is of the essence here, and you're going to have to be able to use time to your advantage. So let's go on some advanced tips. How do you succeed as a scholar on the Scholars Challenge? Order matters not. Many scholars get the challenge and they think, oh, I've got to go from question number 1 to question number 120. That is not true at all. You can do the challenge in whatever order you want as long as you answer the question number to the corresponding question number on the answer sheet, and then that is completely fine. I personally like to start from my areas of expertise, right? I flip straight to the history or special areas section, and then I work my way with the other subjects. It's a good technique to start with the subjects that you are most confident in, because then you'll be able to make sure you've got all the correct answers. Because, for example, if your most favorite subject was at the end of the 120 questions and you spent so long on the other ones that you've only got 5 minutes for the 20, then you're not going to get many points despite the fact you studied so hard for that subject. Remember, your subject should be your specialty and should be your priority here. Now, logic lights the path. If you don't know an answer because you didn't study it in depth specifically, you can use logic to your advantage, right? The Scholars Challenge is based on logical guesses, and you can always play a game of elimination. What I mean by this is that you can eliminate what options are for sure not going to be the right answer, right? If you studied some of the options, but not all of them, you probably know if they answer the question or if they do not. And if they don't, well then cross them off and work your way down to 2 or 3 final questions and then fill them in. Now, every 30-ish minutes or 15 minutes, the World Scholars Cup people will make an announcement over the microphone. Something like this. You have 20 minutes remaining, 20 minutes remaining. And then obviously they'll have their 5 minutes, scholars, and then they'll have their and time, something like that, right? Use those to your advantage. If by 30 minutes you are not halfway through the challenge, that is a serious concern. If by 15 minutes you still have 2 subjects to get to, hurry up. If by 5 minutes you still have 1 subject, you could probably do 5s and 4s, and yeah, because remember, they take this challenge seriously. I have never seen the World Scholars Cup staff more serious than when they're taking the challenge. Well, that and whenever Dylan beheads an alpaca in front of a bunch of scholars. Good job, Dylan. His kill count is rising, by the way. Anyways, so when you use those time announcements to your advantage, that's going to really help you, right? Many scholars lose track of time, and when they have 10 minutes left, they realize that they have so much left to do, they just color it in, essentially, right? I've seen scholars take the challenge and just color in the whole thing. That's not what you should do, right? Never do that. Because A, you're not going to get any good points, and B, you're not going to place, and C, it's a waste of time. Yes, you can use this 50 minutes you have left over to sleep, but come on, it's a great way to show your knowledge of the curriculum, and it's a great way to get those medals, and maybe even a trophy. And the final tip for the advanced tips is to co-study, right? You can always study together. United, you are stronger, and divided, you are weaker. Good quotes. But seriously though, when you study with your team, you're going to be able to be much stronger, because even though you might not have studied a subject area, your team member might have covered it and they can share their notes with you, right? And if you're uncertain about a certain topic, they can explain it to you in a much more detailed sense and in a much more understandable sense. I do this with my team a lot, and it helped us a lot in regionals, and I will probably do it again with them for globals, and you guys probably should take that advice as well, right? Don't study in isolation. Yes, it's good for your own understanding, but from time to time, check in with your team, ask them a couple questions, tell them a couple things you learned, maybe they'll find something useful that they can use on the challenge, and maybe you'll save their lives and vice versa when it comes to that one question that decides whether or not you get a subject medal or an overall medal even in the challenge. But that's all for now, guys, on the challenge, and I hope these tips help you a lot. Now, obviously, we have one more video coming up, and that's going to be on, you guessed it, the Scholars Ball. Yeah, how do you dance around and, well, embarrass yourself and be awkward with other scholars in a social way. Just joking, it's for the Scholars Ball. But if you guys want a video guide for the Scholars Ball or any other events or even resource topic, please comment down below, subscribe, and give a like. You know what, I'm just not even going to bother with the cringe. Go ahead, like, subscribe, press the bell icon, blah, blah, blah. Have a good night, scholars.